Our grad roles are, and I'll say this up front, unfortunately we require applicants to be Australian citizens, and that is entirely due to our custom requirements. So because our work is often, or in the most part, requires a high level of security clearance, the intention is our grads will progress through the clearance levels to be able to go and work on those programs. So we've got a hard requirement for Australian citizenship. So that is something that we ask on the application form. So if you meet that, and there's a couple of other fairly simple, straightforward questions as part of the initial application. We are asking for you to upload your resume and any other supporting documentation as part of your application. By that I mean anything you feel adds weight to your applications. If you want to add a cover letter, that's up to you. If you want to add your academics transcript, do that too. We're not screening on grades. All these extra pieces that you add to your application are going to help when it comes to the final interview. We'll have hiring managers who will be quite interested and curious around the subjects that you've studied or the courses that you've done. So please include those. If you've got links to your GitHub, things like that, I'm always interested to sort of see what you've been doing on there as well. Beyond that initial application, we are inviting candidates who meet the initial requirements to an online capability assessment. Doing this instead of a phone interview, I think it's going to take me too long to speak to several hundred people and give everybody a fair and consistent experience over the phone. So I've put those sorts of typical questions into an online sequence. And this, I think what I've done is about 6 to 7 questions. They are a little bit different depending on the roles that you're looking at. So software engineering, system admin, and the project coordinator, business development, proposal analysis roles. So if you have applied to different roles, you will need to go through that online assessment for each one. So beyond that, stage 2, we would go straight to our final stage, which is an interview. It would normally be a face-to-face interview. Given the COVID-19 situation, we'll be looking to use tools like Zoom. So I'd highly recommend you having a go, practicing with your mates on the free Zoom accounts to kind of get a feel for what it's like talking on video. Maybe give each other some tips around setup of your room. I don't know if you can tell what I've done with my hand disappearing. I've set up a virtual background, which is against a solid colored background. I'm able to upload an image, so you can have some fun with that. I think you might impress some recruiters who haven't explored this yet. Yeah, so face-to-face interviews now replaced with a video live interview, and that would usually include the hiring managers. So we'll look at getting at least one other person from the business or representative that's hiring the role, along with an HR rep. If it's not me, it'll be somebody from our recruitment team helping me with the interviews. And then we go straight to making an offer. And the idea, timeline-wise, is for us to get offers out during May. So we're looking at sort of wrapping this up in terms of our 2021 intake before we get too close to June. In terms of start date, Nick already mentioned before, he actually started mid-year, or not too long after the mid-year semester changes. We seem to have an appetite in our business. If there is work on hand, those managers are fairly quick to ask who's interested, who's available to start sooner rather than later. And another thing that kind of runs concurrently with that is the second we've made offers, we look to start the security clearance application process. We do that pretty quickly because it can take quite a few months for those clearances to start trickling in. And we do need to have some of those clearances in place before we can get you to join your actual home teams.
In terms of Leidos, I actually found, like, as many people do, I applied for a few different opportunities. Leidos was probably less technical than a lot of them. A lot of the questions I encountered from Leidos were not necessarily your coding questions as such, but more around the problem solving side of things. It gave me a problem and more asking it how I'd approach it or how I'd approach a solution. So looking at I know a couple of questions that kind of come to mind. There was one where it was a sorting problem, and they just asked what kind of sorting algorithm would you use and what considerations would you have based on the parameters that they gave me. And then another question I had was it was pretty much just a very generic problem solving question. I gave an answer and then they pretty much posed to me a different solution and asked me how I would take that into account as I with tackling that problem. So in terms of, I guess, what sort of technical questions were I given, it's more about how I approach problems and how I solve problems, and that obviously does relate to the technical side, and asking what kind of algorithms would you use and would you not use, and yeah, I guess they're the kind of questions that I encountered. Not as heavily technical as other companies was my experience.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, and I've seen this in my previous role as well, when a program is able to back the focus on the development side of their grads, there seems to be a little bit less of an interest in doing or including a coding test. And I'm not trying to bag or dismiss the other great companies that are out there that are doing a tech grad type program. With us in particular, we're more, I guess, we're more interested in bringing the type of people in that align to our values, that we can see are going to thrive in this type of industry. Those are the sorts of things that we feel are actually more important to our recruitment process. And so long as there's an ability or technical capability and a willingness to keep learning, to come into a grad role that's technical in nature, you're going to get the support to learn new things as you go. But I guess we're looking for the people that we know are going to bring something nice and different to us, and they're going to align to the things that we hold really important within Leidos, and that's to our values. If you are interested in doing an application for our grad program, please have a look at our values. We've got 6 of them that kind of give a good indication for the way people operate within the business. So you've asked also for just like an explanation or a bit more of detail around the questions at each stage. So very quickly, in the application questionnaire, the typical kind of who you are, basic details. There's one text-based response, which is asking you to give a bit of an explanation to why you want to work for Leidos along those sorts of lines. In the second stage, which is the online assessment piece, those are typical phone interview type questions. So they're not behavioral based yet. So if you do any research around, what are the typical phone interview questions, you'll get the kind of gist of where those questions will go. I've created those to align with some of the skills and the capabilities that I'm looking for across the different roles. So you're all pretty smart. I'm pretty sure that you'll figure that out quite quickly. And then at the final interview, it's mostly behavioral-based questions. So those are the questions that ask you to give us an example of a time where you've been in a team, or this is the situation that's played out, and we're looking for what actions you took, and then to talk through the explanation of why did you take this particular action, what was the outcome of taking those particular choices or making those decisions. And then there'll be some sort of not overly technical questions, but something in there that gives us an idea to evaluate your approach to problem solving.